He's been the most famous rock star on the planet for over 60 years. He's sold more than 300 million records. He's performed on every continent. He's been knighted by the Queen, and at 82 years old, he's still filling stadiums. But here's the part nobody puts on the posters. Mick Jagger has had 8 children with 5 different women. One relationship inspired some of the greatest rock songs ever recorded. One marriage collapsed on the very day it began. One love story ended in a tragedy that stopped a worldwide tour in its tracks. And one partnership that started when he was past 70 proved the entire world wrong about who he really is. Fame brought him everything a person could want, everything except a simple love story. One woman said her marriage to him ended on her wedding day. Another said wild horses couldn't drag her away from him, and that phrase became one of the most famous lyrics in rock history. One woman gave him 22 years and 4 children, only to learn that their marriage had never legally existed. And one woman's death left him so shattered that even Keith Richards said, "No one saw this coming." By the end of this video, you'll understand why the people Mick Jagger loved changed his life more than any album, any tour, or any standing ovation ever could. Even today, people still debate who Mick Jagger truly loved most. This isn't a list of romances. This is the story of the people who shaped one of the most extraordinary lives in the history of music. Before the stadiums, before the magazine covers, before the entire world knew his name, there was a girl who knew Mick Jagger when he was nobody. Michael Philip Jagger grew up in Dartford, Kent. His father was a physical education teacher. His mother was a hairdresser and an active member of the Conservative Party. Young Mick was bright, ambitious, restless in the way that small towns can never quite contain. He excelled at school. He won a place at the London School of Economics. And for a brief moment, it looked like he might follow a respectable, conventional path. But music had already taken hold. He and a childhood acquaintance named Keith Richards had reconnected on a train platform at Dartford Station in 1961. Keith noticed Mick was carrying a stack of American blues and rhythm and blues records under his arm. They started talking. Within months, they were playing in a band. Within 2 years, they were calling themselves the Rolling Stones. And standing beside Mick through all of it was Chrissy Shrimpton. She was 17 when they met at the Ricky Tick Club in 1963. He was a 19-year-old college student with no money, no fame, and no particular reason to believe the future held anything special. Chrissy was a model, and the younger sister of Jean Shrimpton, one of the most celebrated faces in British fashion. Together, they became the original it couple of swinging London. Photographed at every party, written about in every gossip column, she even wrote a monthly column for the American teen magazine Tiger Beat, called From London with Love. But as the Rolling Stones became famous, the balance between them shifted. According to multiple accounts, Mick grew possessive. He dictated who Chrissy could speak to and who she was allowed to see. The boy who'd once needed her validation became a man who expected her obedience. And then came the song. Under My Thumb appeared on the Aftermath album in 1966. Chrissy heard the lyrics and understood the message. Years later, Jagger even filed a court injunction to prevent her from publishing his love letters. Whatever tenderness had existed between them was gone. By the end of 1966, Mick had left her for someone else. Chrissy later told interviewers she attempted to end her own life over his affairs. She eventually married, moved away from London, and lived quietly for decades. Everything changed the moment the Rolling Stones became famous. Mick learned something about himself during those years with Chrissy. He learned that he could charm, consume, and discard. It was a dangerous discovery, and it shaped every relationship that followed. Her name was Marianne Faithfull, and she didn't just date Mick Jagger. She rewired his entire creative mind. They first crossed paths in 1964, at a launch party for the Rolling Stones. She was a teenager, beautiful, ethereal, convent-educated, but wild at heart. Already a recording artist with a hit single called As Tears Go By, written for her by Jagger and Richards. The song put her on the map, but her relationship with Mick made her legendary. Marianne herself later told interviewers, with characteristic bluntness, how the relationship began. She said she slept with 3 members of the Rolling Stones and then decided the lead singer was the best bet. By late 1966, their affair had become public. Mick left Chrissy, and one of rock's most influential partnerships began. For 4 years, Mick and Marianne were inseparable. They were rock royalty in the truest sense. The press followed them everywhere. They They lived together in a world of art, poetry, drugs, and music that seemed to exist outside the rules of normal life. They were also targets. In 1967, police raided Keith Richards' country estate. Marianne was famously photographed wrapped in nothing but a fur rug. The tabloids went feral. The image became one of the defining photographs of the 60s. But behind the glamour, the pressure was crushing both of them. What most people don't realize is how deeply Marianne shaped the Stones' creative evolution. She pushed the band's thinking beyond blues riffs and pop hooks into darker, more literary territory. She introduced Mick to ideas he would never have encountered on his own. She co-wrote Sister Morphine, a harrowing song about addiction that she recorded herself in February 1969. But when Decca Records pulled her single from shelves almost immediately, Marianne felt betrayed. She said Mick hadn't fought hard enough to protect her work. The song eventually appeared as a Stones track on Sticky Fingers in 1971. Marianne received no writing credit for years. That wound never fully healed. She later called it her Frankenstein, her self-portrait in a dark mirror. And then came the moment that would echo through music history. In the summer of 1969, Mick and Marianne traveled to Australia for the filming of a movie called Ned Kelly. Their relationship was already fracturing under the weight of drugs, fame, and mutual exhaustion. Shortly after arriving, Marianne overdosed on sleeping pills. She fell into a coma that lasted 6 days. When she finally opened her eyes, Mick was sitting beside her hospital bed. According to Marianne's own account, the first words she spoke to him were, "Wild horses couldn't drag me away." That phrase became the soul of one of the Rolling Stones' most beloved songs. Keith Richards had written the original melody about missing his newborn son Marlon while on tour, but Mick rewrote the lyrics, pouring in the pain of a relationship disintegrating in real time. The song was recorded at Muscle Shoals Sound Studios in Alabama in December 1969 and appeared on Sticky Fingers in 1971. Mick has always been careful about confirming the story directly, but the timeline speaks for itself. By the spring of 1970, he and Marianne had split permanently. She spiraled into heroin addiction and eventually ended up living on the streets of London. It was years before she clawed her way back. In 1979, she released Broken English, one of the most acclaimed comeback albums in rock history. By the spring of 1970, Marianne had left Mick for Italian artist Mario Schifano. She lost custody of the son she shared from a previous relationship. She was living rough. The woman who had graced the cover of every magazine in London was sleeping on the streets. But Marianne Faithfull was tougher than anyone gave her credit for. In 1979, she released Broken English, a raw and ferocious album that critics called one of the greatest comebacks in rock history. She went on to record more than 20 albums across 5 decades. She survived breast cancer. She survived emphysema. She survived COVID-19. She died on January 30th, 2025, at the age of 78. She once told an interviewer, "He loved me, and I loved him. But something in me compelled me to just walk away. I don't really know why. I had to move on. It was very painful and very hard, as I loved him." Their romance became bigger than either of them, and its wreckage produced some of the finest music of the 20th century. But fame was already pulling Mick towards someone else entirely. You can't tell the full story of the Rolling Stones in the late 60s without understanding the people who orbited the band like satellites. And nobody burned brighter or closer than Anita Pallenberg. The German-Italian actress and model had originally been with Brian Jones before leaving him for Keith Richards in 1967. She became Keith's partner for over 12 years and had 3 children with him. She was fearless, magnetic, multilingual, and deeply entwined in the Stones' creative process. Some band insiders credited her with influencing the group's image as much as any manager or producer. The dynamic between Mick, Keith, and Anita was complicated. During the filming of Performance in 1968, directed by Donald Cammell and Nicholas Roeg, Mick and Anita shared scenes that reportedly went beyond what the script required. Rumors about their involvement persisted for decades. Keith never fully forgave whatever happened on that set. But Anita's influence went deeper than romantic entanglements. She helped shape the band's visual identity. She challenged the men around her intellectually. She was tough and uncompromising, in a world that expected women to be decorative. When she walked into a room, the energy shifted. That force, combined with Marianne's artistic depth, created a period where the women around the Rolling Stones were as creatively vital as the musicians themselves. Sometimes, the most important people in Mick's life weren't romantic partners. They were part of an entire world that was changing around him. The people in the Stones circle didn't just observe history, they collided with each other. They created friction that generated heat, and that heat found its way directly into the music. Understanding that ecosystem is essential to understanding the man. Because Mick Jagger didn't make his choices in a vacuum, he made them inside a whirlwind that was constantly reshaping who he was and what he believed was possible. But while the circle kept reshaping itself, Mick was about to do something nobody saw coming. He was about to get married. Mick Jagger met Bianca Perez Mora Macias at a party after a Rolling Stones concert at the Olympia in Paris in September 1970. She was 25 years old, Nicaraguan-born, educated at the Paris Institute of Political Studies, elegant, composed, and completely unimpressed by fame. That last quality drove Mick wild. When she initially refused to leave the party with him, he became obsessed. He pursued her by telephone. He flew her to meet him on tour in Italy. A mutual friend, painter Donald Cammell, had introduced them. Within months, she was pregnant. On May 12, 1971, they married in a Roman Catholic ceremony in Saint-Tropez, France. She was 4 months pregnant. The guest list read like a who's who of international celebrity. Keith Richards, Paul McCartney, Eric Clapton, Brigitte Bardot. Paparazzi and fans swarmed the streets. It was one of the most photographed weddings of the 20th century. Bianca wore a white Yves Saint Laurent Le smoking jacket with a long bias-cut skirt and a wide-brimmed veiled hat. No traditional gown. No veil. She changed bridal fashion forever with a single outfit. More than 50 years later, Zendaya paid homage to that suit at the 2025 Met Gala. But the fairy tale cracked before the vows were even finished. On the morning of the wedding, Mick reportedly demanded that Bianca sign a prenuptial agreement, relinquishing any claim to his property in the event of a divorce. She nearly called the whole thing off. She later told interviewers, "My marriage ended on my wedding day." Their daughter Jade was born 5 months later, on October 21, 1971, in Paris. For a while, the Jaggers were the most glamorous couple in the world. They were Studio 54 regulars in New York. They jet-setted across Europe on private planes. Andy Warhol photographed them. Halston dressed them. Paparazzi fought for every shot. People who didn't know them envied their lives. People who did know them saw something different. Bianca was intelligent, politically engaged, and increasingly uncomfortable being reduced to an accessory. She wanted to be heard, not just seen. But the world didn't care about her opinions. They wanted pictures of her outfit. Behind the cameras, Bianca felt like she was disappearing. She later said she played the wife, docile and subservient, while groupies and other women circled constantly. She was frequently photographed with male companions herself, but aside from an admitted 2-year affair with Ryan O'Neal, she maintained those encounters were never romantic. In May 1978, Bianca filed for divorce on the grounds of Mick's adultery with model Jerry Hall. She reportedly received a settlement of around $1.2 million. After the divorce, Bianca reinvented herself completely. She became a prominent human rights advocate, campaigning against violence, poverty, and environmental destruction across the globe. She's the only Nicaraguan to have addressed the United Nations General Assembly. The woman who the world once knew only as Mick Jagger's glamorous wife built a legacy entirely her own, one that had nothing to do with rock and roll. To the world, Mick and Bianca had looked perfect. Behind closed doors, the distance between them had been growing since the moment he asked her to sign away her future on the morning of their wedding. And yet another woman had already stepped into his life. Jerry Hall wasn't just another romance in a long line. She became the longest partnership of Mick Jagger's life. 22 years, 4 children, more drama than most rock bands generate in their entire careers. They met around 1976 at a dinner in London. She was a Texas-born supermodel, already one of the most recognizable faces in fashion. She was engaged to musician Bryan Ferry at the time. Mick was still technically married to Bianca. Neither detail stopped anything. By 1978, Mick and Jerry were together publicly. Bianca's divorce had been filed, and for the next 2 decades, Jerry stood beside Mick through album cycles, world tours, tabloid scandals, and the relentless demands of being the Rolling Stones' frontman. She gave him something he'd never had before: consistency, domesticity, a family base that lasted. Their 4 children, Elizabeth, James, Georgia May, and Gabriel, grew up in a household that was simultaneously extraordinary and surprisingly grounded. Jerry cooked. She organized birthday parties. She made sure the children did their homework. She tried to create normalcy inside a life that had no normal. Ask yourself what that takes: raising 4 children while your partner is on a different continent for months at a time, while tabloids run stories about his latest affair, while cameras follow you to the grocery store. Jerry Hall did that for 22 years. In 1990, they married in a Hindu ceremony on a beach in Bali. The waves crashed behind them. Their children watched. To the outside world, it looked beautiful. It felt permanent. It wasn't. The infidelities never stopped. They couldn't stop. Because Mick Jagger, for all his intelligence and charm and musical genius, seemed constitutionally incapable of monogamy. Mick's affair with French model Carla Bruni became public. Other women came and went. And then, in 1998, Brazilian model Luciana Morad announced she was pregnant with Mick's child. Their son Lucas was born in 1999. For Jerry, this was the final betrayal. She filed for divorce. And then the cruelest twist arrived. Mick's lawyers argued that the Hindu ceremony in Bali had never been legally binding under English law. The civil portion of the ceremony had never been properly completed. A high court judge agreed. Their 22-year union wasn't divorced. It was annulled, legally erased, as if it had never existed at all. Think about what that means: 22 years, 4 children, thousands of photographs, millions of shared memories. And a court said none of it constituted a marriage. Jerry was devastated. She later told interviewers that she had repeated her mother's mistakes, but she also insisted that Mick had been a good father, that he'd always supported her career, that despite everything, real love had existed between them. They remained amicable for the sake of their children. Jerry attended Mick's 80th birthday party in 2023. They were seen laughing together. Whatever wounds remained, they'd found a way to coexist. But the next chapter of Mick's life would bring something nobody expected. Not another scandal, not another affair. A tragedy. After Jerry, Mick found something quieter, something that made people close to him believe he might have actually changed. Her name was Marianne Scott. She was a fashion designer from Utah who had left home as a teenager to model in Paris. Tall, self-possessed, intensely private, she had built a career through sheer talent, designing clothes worn by Nicole Kidman, Angelina Jolie, Penelope Cruz, and Sarah Jessica Parker. She wasn't interested in being known as Mick Jagger's girlfriend. She was determined to be known for her own work. They began dating around 2001. For 13 years, they built something that was, by Mick Jagger's standards, remarkably stable. She attended his tours. He sat front row at her fashion shows. They traveled together. They built homes together. People who knew them said they seemed genuinely content, not performing happiness, feeling it. On March 17, 2014, Marianne Scott was found dead in her Manhattan apartment. She was 49 years old. The New York City medical examiner ruled her death a suicide. Mick was halfway around the world. The Rolling Stones were on tour in Australia when the call came. The band postponed the remaining shows on their 14 On Fire tour immediately. No hesitation, no debate. Keith Richards released a statement that stripped away decades of rock star posturing. No one saw this coming. Mick's always been my soul brother, and we love him. We're thick as thieves, and we're all feeling for the man. Charlie Watts said the band's first priority was supporting Mick. Ronnie Wood said they were all pulling together. And Mick's own words were devastating. I am still struggling to understand how my lover and best friend could end her life in this tragic way. We spent many wonderful years together and had made a great life for ourselves. She had great presence, and her talent was much admired, not least by me. I will never forget her. He posted a single black and white photograph of Marianne on his website. He titled it simply, Marianne. He later learned that she had left her entire estate, estimated at $9 million, to him. Even Mick's ex-wife Bianca released a statement. Heartbroken to learn of the loss of the lovely and talented Marianne Scott. My thoughts and prayers are with her family. May she rest in peace. In the years that followed, Mick continued to honor her memory. On what would have been her 52nd birthday, he posted a quiet photo on Instagram with the caption, "Remembering Lorraine on her birthday. Some losses don't fade with time. They become part of you. They change the way you carry yourself through every room you enter for the rest of your life." The Stones eventually resumed their tour. Mick returned to the stage. Because that's what Mick Jagger does. He moves forward. He refuses to stop. But anyone paying attention could see that the man who stepped back into the spotlight was carrying something heavier than any song could hold. The public has always seen Mick Jagger as the ultimate rock star. The swagger, the lips, the moves, the reputation. His children know someone different. 8 kids, 5 mothers, generations apart. His eldest, Karis, was born in 1970 to singer and activist Marsha Hunt. His youngest, Devereaux, arrived in 2016. That's a 46-year gap between children. Karis is older than some of his other children's mothers. He has 6 grandchildren. His grandchildren and his youngest son are roughly the same age. Think about what that means for a single person's life. Mick Jagger has been a young father, a distracted father, an absent father, and eventually something closer to the father he probably always wanted to be. He's juggled tour schedules and school plays. He's tried, according to those close to him, to bring all 8 of his children together whenever he can. The world sees a rock icon strutting across a stage. His children know the man who video calls before bedtime, who shows up for graduations, who argues about screen time, who embarrasses his teenagers the same way every other father on earth does. Georgia May became a supermodel. Jade became a jewelry designer. James became an actor. Karis graduated from Yale. Elizabeth modeled and acted. Each of them found their own path. Each of them grew up with a father who was simultaneously the most famous and one of the most complicated men alive. Jerry Hall, despite everything, has said Mick is a good father, that he's always been there for the children, that the private man behind the public persona is warmer and more present than anyone would expect. The contradiction between those two versions of Mick Jagger might be the most human thing about him. Most people expected Mick Jagger to slow down after Lorraine's death. He was 70. He'd been performing for over 50 years. He'd lost the woman he loved in the most devastating way possible. Instead, he started another chapter entirely. Melanie Hamrick was 27 years old when she first met Mick Jagger backstage at a Rolling Stones concert in Tokyo in February 2014. She was a ballerina with the American Ballet Theatre in New York. He was still in a relationship with Lorraine Scott at the time, and nothing happened between them. Several months later, after Lorraine's death, Mick reached out. He texted Melanie and asked if she'd like to get coffee. A friendship developed, then something deeper. In December 2016, Melanie gave birth to their son, Devereaux Octavian Basil Jagger. Mick was 73 years old. The tabloids couldn't resist the math. There's a 44-year age gap between them. His eldest grandchild is older than his youngest son. The headlines practically wrote themselves. But Melanie has been clear about how she sees it. In an interview with The Times in 2024, she said, "I don't think about it. Am I happy? Yes. Are the people in my life happy? Yes. Am I hurting anyone? No. They can mind their own business." She's a dancer, a choreographer, and a novelist. Her debut book, First Position, was published while she was raising Devereaux and navigating life with one of the most famous men alive. Before Mick, she had been engaged to Cuban professional dancer Manuel Carreno. She had a career of her own, and an identity that existed independently of any man. That independence, perhaps, is exactly what drew Mick to her. She's described their relationship as a perfect balance. Both performers. Both understand the demands of life on stage. But they keep their professional lives separate. You're working with the person all day, and then you're with them at night. It's too much of each other, she told People. In April 2025, she confirmed to Paris Match that she and Mick had been secretly engaged for 2 or 3 years. When asked about a wedding, her answer was disarmingly honest. Maybe one day we'll marry, maybe not. We are so happy in our current life that I would be too afraid to change anything. The couple splits their time between England, France, the Caribbean, and Italy. She writes, he tours. They raise their son together. Mick tries to get all 8 of his children in the same room as often as possible. It's the quietest chapter of his life, and perhaps the one he needed most. If you look at each of these relationships separately, they read like chapters in a celebrity gossip column. But step back, and a different picture emerges. Chrissy Shrimpton gave Mick his first experience of love, and the first warning that power can poison everything it touches. Marianne Faithfull cracked open his creative mind and showed him that music could reach into places he'd never dared go. Bianca taught him about glamour and independence and the price of treating a marriage like a stage performance. Jerry Hall gave him stability, family, and the longest sustained partnership of his life. Lorenz Scott gave him something rare and fragile, a love built on mutual respect between two people who valued their work as deeply as each other. And Melanie Hamrick gave him something nobody expected, a second chance. Proof that you don't stop growing at 70, that love doesn't come with an expiration date. You can't rank these relationships. You can only recognize that Mick Jagger, without any single one of them, would have been a fundamentally different person. Different songs, different performances, a different man. The world remembers Mick Jagger as the ultimate rock star, the swagger, the voice, the performances that haven't slowed down in 6 decades. But behind every era of his life, there was someone helping shape the man behind the legend. Some relationships ended in heartbreak. Some ended in friendship. Some ended far too soon. Yet every one of them changed the story. Mick Jagger once said in an interview that he isn't very good at talking about his emotions, that he processes things through music, that the songs say what he can't find the words for in conversation. If that's true, then listen to Wild Horses again. Listen to the ache in Angie. Listen to the bitterness in Under My Thumb and the resignation in Beast of Burden. Every ballad, every love song, every bitter lyric about loss and betrayal is a window into a man who felt everything deeply but could only show it through his art. He's 82 years old now. He's still performing, still writing, still moving across stages with an energy that defies explanation. His youngest son is 8. His oldest grandchildren are adults. He's been in love more times than most people dare to dream about. And he's lost love in ways that most people couldn't survive. For all the records sold and all the stadiums filled, the people closest to Mick Jagger left the deepest marks on his life. Perhaps that's why his greatest legacy isn't only the music he created, it's the lives he shared it with. Which relationship do you think had the greatest impact on Mick Jagger's life? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories behind music's biggest legends.